Professor Steiner here, and I'd like to talk about something today that probably would apply to most students who approach a classical, traditional martial art for self-defense. Now, I don't want to say, which would not be true, that classical traditional martial arts are not good for self-defense. What I have to point out is you have to study them for a very, very long time before they are good for practical self-defense. And within those arts, there are techniques that are taught that I would have to disagree with significantly, techniques that have what I call a shelf life. Now, one of the systems of martial arts that I studied, and it was a very good system and I respect it to this day, I think it's one of the finest of the Taekwondo styles, which is the Chung Do Kwan. The emphasis in Chung Do Kwan, as Duck-Sun Sung would say, is self-defense. It's a martial art, a military art. Fine. But I remember, as a young man, stretching myself continuously to be able to raise my side kick and my roundhouse kick. Well, with all due respect, the high side kicks, the high roundhouse kicks, are kicks that have a shelf life. Now, I don't even recommend them for a youngster who can do them for practical use in self-defense, but you might get away with it when you're 18 or 19 or 20 or 25 years old and you stretch every day. Like that great karate practitioner, Bill Wallace, Superfoot Wallace, he said he practiced stretching 3 hours a day every day to maintain his kicking ability, and here was a man with a natural predisposition for kicking. You have to have that physiological advantage to be able to do it the way he did it for as long as he did it. But there are techniques with a shelf life, and techniques that require extreme flexibility, where you have to stretch a lot to be able to do it. You don't want to spend your time on those techniques if your purpose is practical self-defense. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with practicing those techniques if you understand their weakness. Certain types of holds. I remember back in the days when I was studying jiu-jitsu, someone had mentioned in the sport of judo, Kodokan Judo, there's a hold that takes 6 years to master. Well, that's admirable. Anybody who devotes himself for a good number of years to master a hold because he's dedicated to judo has my sincere respect. I think that's wonderful and good for you. But for practical self-defense, taking 6 years to learn a hold is silly for 2 reasons. First of all, you just wasted 100 times more time than it would take to learn how to defend yourself in total. And second, you're not going to be using that as well when you reach your 50s and 60s. Your body changes as you get older. Things that I could do in my 20s and 30s, I couldn't attempt to do now, things that I could have done. But what I can do are the types of techniques that I've included in American Combato, the types of techniques that other instructors who stick with what is practical include in their systems. The chin jab, the chop, low side kicks. In jiu-jitsu, we learned numerous types of throws. One of them, which really was from judo, makikomi, absolute insanity for self-defense. First, because it really isn't very practical. And second, you have to stay and practice with that and be able to do it with perfect timing and balance. These are not techniques that because you achieve the ability to do them beautifully and win championships in your 20s with, you can count on for self-defense in the street when you're 63 years old. This doesn't correlate. This doesn't work. Holds that require precision timing. Yeah, you can develop it, maybe get pretty good at it, using it while you're young and fast, and you go to the dojo 3 or 4 times a week. This is not going to stay with you, and it's certainly not going to stay with you to a level that permits you to use it against a determined attacker who is 1/3 your age, an experienced street fighter, and is attacking you by surprise. And those are the techniques that we want to keep, the ones that don't have that shelf life. There was a situation that occurred here in Seattle. One of my students had a neighbor in his 80s, and unfortunately this man is no longer with us. But this man was in his 80s. He had served with the OSS in World War II, and he had learned under William Fairbairn the basic skills that they taught, which were not large in number, but they were very effective. And one of them was what Fairbairn called the edge of the hand blow. Open your hand and chop. Now you can do that at any age, and this guy did. In his 80s, he was attacked by someone coming out of a grocery store. He was coming out of a grocery store on his way to his car. This young guy, and he estimated the guy was about maybe 20 years old, stopped him and wanted to rob him. Well, without even thinking, the older man, when he realized it was a robbery, he just chopped this guy fast. I think he hit him in the neck. The guy collapsed. The guy got in his car and drove away. Now, there's an example of a technique that has no shelf life. I'm sure he could do it a lot better in the 1940s when he first learned it, but it served him pretty well in his 80s. And that's what you're looking for in self-defense. You want techniques, of course, that are compatible with you, that you can do well. But they also must be techniques that you can do well 30, 40 years from now. When you're older, you become a more attractive target as you get older. You become more vulnerable, and therefore much more in need of defensive capabilities. Low, simple kicks, elbow strikes, open hand jabs and chops, heel of the hand blows, a headbutt, biting, gouging, clawing. These are techniques that I guess you could call them crude in some ways, but if you practice them assiduously when you're young, they will stay with you. Simple skills stay with you all your life. Jack Dempsey, world champion heavyweight boxer. In his 80s, long after he was able to box per se, he was with a boxing commissioner in downtown New York, in Manhattan, and they were on their way somewhere together. They were calling a cab, and 2 punks tried to rob them. Jack Dempsey knocked each one out with a punch apiece. Now, he certainly was in no boxing condition. He wasn't set to box, but he was able to retain those skills because they were simple. A fast punch is easy to retain. I don't recommend it unless you're a heavyweight boxing champion. I recommend other blows. But those are the kind of skills, simple, basic skills, whether it's a simple throw, whether it's a simple blow, a simple combination that you can use. Distract, throwing something in somebody's face, ram them in the solar plexus with an uppercut, and then knee him in the face when he doubles over, or knee him in the testicles if he doesn't double over. Not hard to practice that. Not hard to do that. Certainly not hard to retain it once your body has been doing it for years. Now, the one drawback to this, and I have to admit it, maybe this is a drawback. I personally don't find it so, but you might. Boredom. You might get bored practicing the same movements over and over again. And here, I would say it's worth it. Just like it's worth it to become a champion boxer, to constantly drill in boxing if that's your purpose. Boxers willingly pay the price. They pay the price because they want to be champion boxers. Well, if you want to be able to defend yourself, pay the price. Work on techniques such as those that are taught throughout our DVD training program. Train in those techniques constantly so it gets boring. Remind yourself what's at stake. Won't it be worth it if these techniques save your life one day? Or the life of someone you love? Practice what will be good for you when you are out of your prime, past your prime. Practice techniques that don't have a shelf life, and they'll be there when you need them.